this deal with all these federal agencies posting on their website that the radical left Democrats... I mean, is there anybody with a spine left in these agencies that are just going to say to Trump, you know what, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to put on our website that the radical left, whatever they're putting. Yeah. Is there anybody? I mean, we talk about Democrats have no spine. I don't know, man. Like, I don't think
it's not a matter of Republicans having no spine. They agree with Trump. That's what makes it so frightening. It's not as if they're acting solely because they're afraid of Trump. There is something to that. But, when you look at dictators and how they seize power, yes, they seize power in part because people fear them. They're afraid of them. They're afraid not to go along. But they also seize power by persuading people through the big lie, the classic technique of dictators, and gain public support. There's a good bit of literature about the Nazi regime, how just ordinary Germans, everyday people, willingly participated in the gassing and machine gunning of Jews. They didn't do it just because they were afraid or because they were forced to do it. The great horror was they willingly participated. I'm not comparing what's going on today to the Holocaust, but I'm making the bigger point that people go along because they come to believe in the lies of the dictator, not just because they're afraid. And that's so chilling.
I'm not saying that necessarily they're afraid. And I don't know, how could a sane person agree with this? Agree with putting these radical left messages on government agencies?
How could a sane person agree with gassing Jews?
Well, yeah.
A much more extreme.
Sure.
And yet ordinary, sane people, millions of them were complicit in this. And that's I can't emphasize too much. It's all in my book, Conservative at the Core, in which I explain Trump is not an aberration. He is the culmination of 100 years of conservative history in the United States, and he holds sway over the Republican Party only in small part because of fear, in much greater part because he articulates and represents what conservatives have stood for 100 years, but in recent years, others have been too frightened, too worried to articulate what Trump does. And that's really important to understand.
Right. All right, let's move on to our next.
And that helps explain the 180-degree, neck-breaking twists of J.D. Vance.
J.D. Vance is beyond a hypocrite. I don't even know what the word... Well,
we've talked about this before. Yeah. We need a new word.
Right. He was calling Trump a Nazi before anybody else was.
Long before.
Now he's his vice president.
Yeah.
That's a crazy 180.
Not just as vice president, but parroting everything that Trump says and stands for.
Sometimes when I watch J.D. Vance, it almost feels like he's an actor.
I know.
He's so again, parody. He's so like down the line in terms of like this sort of like fascist authoritarian rhetoric. But that is so different than the man he was like
just a few years ago.
Yeah, like
we're not talking 20 years ago.
Yeah, 5-10 years ago. It's like, holy moly, it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
All right, our next topic. You ready?
I'm always ready.
The Trump administration is pushing colleges to sign a new, quote, compact or risk losing out on federal funding preferences.
If it wasn't for the shutdown, this would be our blaring in red lights headline. This is an unprecedented attempt for Trump to impose his own political orthodoxy on private and public, by the way, on institutions of higher learning. And he is using the power of the federal government to do that. A classic move of authoritarians. You bully institutions into conforming to your own political orthodoxies and your own political interests. And he's saying, in effect, if you don't do this, if you don't agree to these demands, including not, teaching or promulgating things that would call into question or embarrass conservatives, which could be anything other than the Trump party line. If you don't conform to this, guess what you're not going to get?
Money, money, money.
That's right. He controls, hundreds of billions of dollars in federal aid and grants to American institutions of higher learning. And he has tremendous power. And this is what the framers feared. The framers understood that they were giving awesome power to the chief executive, who would be both the head of the executive branch and the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And they had just shed blood to free themselves from a tyrant, King George III. And their greatest fear by far about the corruption of their fledgling new democratic republic was corruption and authoritarianism in the hands of the president, who they gave this awesome power to. That's why they tried to balance as best they could the power of the presidency against the other two branches of government, to have, separation of powers between the presidency, the judiciary, and Congress, and why they had the 10th Amendment, which reserves significant powers to the states as another check on the presidency. But as James Madison said, and I'm paraphrasing, you can put all the paper safeguards you want into effect, and in the end, it comes down to virtue. If we, and I'm going off Madison now, if we have someone as powerful as a president, way more powerful today than they were in Madison's time, who lacks virtue and who wants to rule as an authoritarian, then all of the paper restraints may not be enough. That may indeed put our democratic republic in great peril. And we're seeing those fears emerge right before our eyes. And we're seeing it in the two areas which are classic for dictators to gain power. Number one, controlling what we believe and what we think and what we know, controlling education, controlling communication, and two, controlling the military. Can you let me see if I can find this. I have a great quote here from Alexander Hamilton. You know him?
Alexander Hamilton. I am Alexander Hamilton.
That's him. It's hard with one hand.
You want me to help? Yeah.
Yeah, I need some help.
That was from the musical Hamilton.
Oh, you were very good at that.
Thanks. You liked Hamilton, right?
I love the music. I didn't think I would.
Yeah.
So, I find...
I didn't think I would either. And I
All right, here it is.
Aha.
The great exponent of the American Constitution, Alexander Hamilton. You may or may not be familiar with the Federalist Papers, written by Hamilton, Madison, and John Jay.
I am.
Which were the great expositions of the meaning and implications of the Constitution and what we needed to do to safeguard our democratic republic. Remember when, interestingly, a woman asked Benjamin Franklin after the Constitutional Convention, do we have a republic? And Franklin says, yes, if we can keep it. They were very, very worried about keeping our republic. And here's what Hamilton said about the dangers of a politicized military. This is right after the Constitution, Federalist number 8. Quote, when the military state becomes elevated above the civil, citizens are subjected to frequent infringements on their rights, unquote. And they come to regard the soldier, quote, as not only their protector, but their superior. He went on to say, once that takes hold, quote, it becomes nearly impossible to resist usurpation supported by the military power, unquote. Alexander Hamilton, one of the great framers of our democratic republic, warning about the putting the military superior to the civilians. That's why many years later, in 1878, Congress passed the Posse Comitatus Act, expressly prohibiting the use of the military for domestic law enforcement, except under the most extraordinary and limited of circumstances. Now we're seeing both thought control and the use of the military power to threaten, in a way, our democracy hasn't been threatened since the Civil War. Thanks for watching our video, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and become a member today.